Student behavior problems can impact every facet of even the most well-run schools. It's extremely difficult to move the academic needle if your administrative leadership team is dealing with disciplinary issues all day long. The traditional response of punitive zero-tolerance policies are very rarely beneficial past short-term intermissions in the behavior as the student is removed from the learning environment. These policies often compound issues when dealing with a student who has undergone severe traumatic issues outside of the school. For this reason, positive behavior support strategies and systems have gained a great deal of popularity around the country. These systems utilize social emotional learning as a tool to improve the behavior through clear expectations, progress monitoring, rewarding the behaviors that are desired in your school, as opposed to focusing on only the negatives. Positive behavior interventions and support, or PBIS, is a proactive approach to behavior building. It's a tiered system of supports designed to differentiate between the level of support your students need. So what are the PBIS tiers? Well, tier one is given to all students. In this tier, we're teaching school-wide expectations, and we're establishing the team that will lead the charge in setting those expectations, teaching them, progress monitoring, and planning rewards for your students who meet those goals. This is meant to meet the needs of roughly 80% of your students. The next two tiers require an additional team consisting of counselors, admin, behavior experts, and your social worker. This is your MTSS team. These students receive all the Tier 1 services as well as specialized plans to treat the specific behavioral needs of those students. This could include regular group meetings, mentorship, behavior logs, or any other number of specialized plans that make sense for your school. Why use PBS tiers? The approach is broken into tiers for the same reason we differentiate in the classroom. Kids have varying needs, and we need to meet them where they are. There's also the idea of equitable versus equal. If all resources were divided equally, we would inevitably fall very short in meeting the needs of a great number of our students. The equitable distribution of resources in a school is an approach designed to give each student the best chance for success. If focused all your efforts on your Tier 2 and 3 students, you're likely growing the amount of students receiving those needs. The PBIS pyramid. It can be helpful to look at PBIS as a pyramid with each tier representing its own section. We'll dive into each tier and its meaning here. Tier 1. This is universal. This is for all students and all settings. It's going to include the expectation signage, the school-wide rewards, social emotional skills lessons, but it's going to require a Tier 1 team consisting of a coach, administrator, and teachers from all the grade levels or teams you're building, a parent, and you also would like to have student representation on this team as well. Good examples of this team would set the school-wide expectations, and they would be responsible for progress monitoring as well as rewarding the students who meet the expectations. Tier 2, this is a targeted or selected group. We're going to meet in a classroom or small group settings. You're talking 10 to 20% of your students. This could include social skills groups, daily check-ins, or classroom behavior interventions. It's going to require an MTSS team consisting of counselors, admin, youth service coordinators, social workers, any behavior or mental health specialist that works with your students on a regular basis. A good example of this would be identifying the students whose needs are not being met by Tier 1 services and then developing the plans to meet the behaviors that are being displayed. Tier 3, this is targeted and intensive. Individual interventions that are not meant for more than 3 to 5% of your students. It's going to include the individualized interventions for high-risk behaviors. This is going to be the same as Tier 2, but it might also include community-based services. This team will identify students whose needs are not being met by Tier 1 or 2 structures, and they need to create a specialized plan that can address the very specific needs for those individual students. Getting started with PBS tiers for your school. If you're watching this, odds are your students have behavioral needs. They aren't perfect, they can be difficult, they keep you busy. Your resources are being spent on addressing behaviors as opposed to improving leading the instruction. If that sounds familiar, you aren't alone. Especially after a year of remote learning, it is vital that we are intentional and proactive on student discipline practices. So where do you begin? Start with Tier 1. The number one goal with PBS should be to create a strong Tier 1 that has buy-in from all stakeholders and is implemented with fidelity throughout your building. There's a reason it's the base of the pyramid. If you start putting resources and time into Tier 2 and 3 before you address Tier 1, your problems are probably going to grow. Your PBS strategy should be to move students down the pyramid first. The more students whose needs can be met by your Tier 1 structures, the fewer issues your specialists will need to spread their time and energy on, thus giving them the most vital resource when dealing with students with intensive behaviors: time. The time to develop relationships, the time to develop plans, and the time to carry out those plans. If this group is more than 20% of your population, you have a Tier 1 problem. This is no different than instruction. If you employ academic interventionists, You don't expect them to reach all students. You expect high quality teacher instruction to meet the needs of most of your kids. Your interventionists are there to provide additional supports, not to replace good Tier 1 instruction. This is the same with behavior. Your Tier 1 support is the key to the success and your staff's sanity.